Good evening. My name is Matt McCoy. I'm the chairman of the North Kingstown 350th Anniversary Steering Committee. And so on behalf of the committee and the town, I would like to welcome you to this session of our lecture series. How many people have come to one of these previously? All right, awesome. So for the people who it's your first one, welcome. The schedule for the rest of them is online on our town website, and I would encourage you to keep coming. They've been very popular. If you've missed one of the previous ones, we have a YouTube channel, and on the website you're able to find the link, click on it, you can watch the video at your leisure at home. So nothing happens for free, right? This event, the lecture series, was originally sponsored, but it still is sponsored by the North Kingstown, or Friends of the North Kingstown Free Library. And in order to move it into this facility and to add additional lectures, we had to get additional sponsors. So I'm going to make a quick introduction for some of them. Starting with Michelle Desautels from Fresh Maps. So if you want to come up and...
Hi guys. Thanks for being here tonight. Thank you, Matt, for your leadership of this fun adventure we call a celebration. So I have 350 pieces of chocolate in a basket in the hallway. To get one of them, you just need to give me your email address. And why do I want my email address? Because Tim and I are working on a history trivia quest. It's going to happen in September. There's information on the town website about it. We're calling it the History Hunt. We were calling it a scavenger hunt, but with a scavenger hunt, you go somewhere and you take things. You can't take anything from any of the properties that we're going to send you to. So it's a new trivia quest, but we're doing a weekly trivia contest with raffle prizes. And all you need to do is give me your email address. I'm going to pass this around, and if you'd like to use your smartphone to scan a QR code, you can do that. If not, just give me your email address when you leave, and I'll be happy to put you on the list. So I'll just pass these around and just send them back. There's 3 of them over here. And just put them on the table on your way out from the back row. I think that's it.
All right, so Michelle has generously offered her services as a sponsor, so she's made an in-kind donation, which has helped us put on this program. So thank you.
Thank you.
So another one of the people or organizations that is helping us with sponsorship this year is North Coffee, which is located on Post Road. And one of the things that they're doing is cool, which is we have these lecture series on each of the villages. So this one is for Slocum. Okay, that one's for Coincides. Okay, we're going to have one for the other villages. So if you're a coffee drinker and you want a different kind of coffee that's tied to the villages here in North Kingstown, you can purchase some tonight or swing by North Coffee on Post Road.
Yeah. Yep. So we roast everything in-house. We get all the beans from all across the world green, and then they go through our big yellow roaster and come out as coffee. And so everything is roasted in-house. It's super fun. So yeah, so every month we'll have a different bean for each town. I have a little bit of Coincides left, and then some Slocum. And then when you buy a pound, 10% of the proceeds go back to the town. So a little sponsorship in there as well. So.
Right.
Thank you.
And so the funds that we receive through this program and our other fundraising are going to help pay for the 350th Gala, which is coming up on Thursday, the 25th, over at the Quonset Oak Club. How many people have tickets? All right. We also have a North Kingstown 350th Family Day, which will occur on Saturday, the 14th of September at Wilson Park. And then on October the 5th, which is a Saturday, we are having our North Kingstown 350th Parade. So what I'd like to do at this point is introduce your presenters. The first person is Tim Cranston, who I'm sure, how many people do not know Tim Cranston? Okay, so a man who needs no introduction. But Tim is our town historian. The other folks that I want to introduce you to is Donna Desautels. Okay, she was kind enough to spell that out phonetically for me, so that I didn't screw it up. And Mr. Noss from 215, so we're going to see a movie, and she interviewed Mr. Noss in 2015. It was in a PBS production, Our Town, North Kingstown. It's a half hour of additional footage from the filming. The full video is 1.5 hours and will be available through the library. If you have not been to the North Kingstown Free Library, they spent a lot of time getting display and exhibits set up there, so I encourage you to go check it out. And then Jim Garman, he hosted a Slocum bus tour when Wickford hosted the 2016 Rhode Island Statewide Historic Preservation Conference. Mr. Garman, he is the Tim Cranston of Portsmouth, if I remember. And you're associated with the Portsmouth Historic Society, is that correct? Okay. So Jim Garman has a passion for local history over the past 50 years. He's the official town historian of Portsmouth, retired history photography teacher at Portsmouth Abbey School. He's written 6 books on Newport County history, and he lectures frequently on the history of the area. And he encouraged Donna to meet Mr. Noss, and on several occasions the two of them sat down with him to learn all about Slocum history. So without further ado, introduce Jim and Donna and Tim, and an enjoyable presentation. Thank you.
Thanks again. I know what you're thinking. Oh, him again. But I'm not going to talk too long. I just want to kind of give you an overview of Slocum so you have a sense of it. I mean, does everybody know where Slocum is? It's one of those places, if you're not from Slocum, you're probably like, I've heard of it, but where is it? Think turf farms and you've got Slocum. And that's part of the story we're going to talk about today. And I have a few photographs of Slocum when it was a village, but Slocum is a place that started out with as an agricultural community, and really is the last place that really still is an agricultural community, not only just in North Kingstown, but in there's only a handful left in Rhode Island. It began around the time of the Revolution, when folks began to settle out there, and as you can imagine, some of the earliest settlers had the last name of Slocum. It was called Slocumville for quite a while, and for quite a while, for more than a century, it existed as a place that was like many other farming areas in New England at that time. Family subsistence farms, quite a number of them, 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 acres or so, people living out on the land and trying to make the best of it. And like all subsistence farmers, they all tried to raise food for their families, but also in order to get the stuff that you can't grow on the farm, they would all typically have another crop, which they would call their cash crop, which they would grow in abundance if they were, something they might be good at, or the area that they was favorable, and they'd utilize that as something to either sell or barter to get the other things that you might need to survive in the late 1700s and early 1800s. But then as time went on, it became more of a village. Things with this kind of group of families out there, it slowly became an actual village, and to be a village, you have to have a church, which they did. You have to have school, which they did. They have to have a community building, which they did with the Grange Hall. I mean, all the kind of things you'd expect for a village. It was a small village, but an important one. They indeed had a rail station out there. Slocum Railroad Station is one of 2 stations in North Kingstown that were really all about agriculture. The Slocum Station and the Davisville Station were both based solely on agriculture. The Slocum Station was about things that were grown in the land, and things were then packed up and sold off and shipped up to Providence or Boston or down to New York from the rail station. And in Davisville, it was a different sort of an area, because that area in Davisville was surrounded by poultry farms. And At that train station, they actually had a poultry holding and feeding area, and poultry would be driven down the roads of Old Baptist Road towards the rail station, where they would be loaded onto rail cars as well. So these two places were all about agriculture. Of course, Davisville's history went quite a bit different direction, but Slocum stayed agriculture. So as time went on, the agricultural changed out there in Slocum. From small subsistence farming, the farms slowly became to be enlarged as people bought up farms and combined them, until you get into the beginning of the 20th century, and it's really becoming an area that's primarily focused on dairy farming. There was an awful lot of dairy farms out there, and eventually less and less houses. And the way agriculture was changing as agriculture became more larger scale, and the farmlands out in Slocum, which are the best farmlands and some of the best farmlands in all of southern New England, they were viewed to be too valuable. So if there's a house on there that wasn't needed, it was taken down. If there was a barn or an outbuilding down there, it was taken down, and all the land was utilized for farming. So we had large-scale dairy farming out there for quite a while, up until around the time of World War II, and after that, things changed again. Dairy as a deal that they could make money on became less and less profitable, and the Slocum farmers adapted, and they became potato farmers. And it's interesting because they weren't just the kind of potato farmers we think about. They were potato farmers for a very specific type of potato called a chipper. Chippers are a small, solid, creamy white potato that is specifically bred for the potato chip industry. And if you grew up in the 50s and 60s in New England and you got a can of Charles chips or a bag of Wise chips or a bag of Lay's chips, more than likely you were getting chips that were grown in Slocum. So acres upon acres upon acres of Slocum was turned over to potatoes. And when I was a boy, I remember driving around there and seeing nothing but potato plants as far as the eye could see. And every harvest time, it was all about getting those potatoes out of the ground and getting them on trucks and sending them off to all these plants that were turning them into potato chips. That too changed, and after a while, we end up with the Slocum that we have today. And it's interesting because I think about the products that are grown out in Slocum now, primarily grass. And some of the farmers, particularly Linda Tucker, who runs Sodco, has she's an entrepreneurial woman. It's amazing to think of this woman as being the head of the largest of the turf farms that are out there in Slocum. She's seen around the bend, and she's taking some of her fields where she was growing traditional turf grasses, and she's now growing grasses that are drought resistant. She's growing grasses that are clover-based, and she's also turned a bunch of her fields over into a specific type of corn that can be used in pellet corn for ovens, for heating your home. So again, the industry is changing as times change, and Slocum is still able, because of the entrepreneurial spirit and the imagination of literally 200 and something years worth of farmers, to continue to be an agricultural community. And it's remarkable that we still have that out there. And supporting agriculture, as you know, I work for the town, and Matt can attest to this, supporting agriculture in our community is important. Agriculture is a great use of land, and it's part of the character of our community, and we're pleased to be able to boast that we have as much agricultural land in the community as we do. So let's take a little look at some photos of Slocum. Let's see. I'll try to, but it's not working. Technical difficulties. To bring up somebody who has technical knowledge.
Busted.
Oh.
Use the arrow key.
Arrow.
No, it's not working either.
Great. See, well, we got technician here. This is that Slocum train station that I spoke about, and you know, you could see it if you, it's the area where it is still available. This is the turn that goes down Slocum Road that would head down towards URI, and the train station was right there. And as I said, it was an important stop along the line for the railroad would stop in here. People could get on and off here to Slocumville, but also it was available there for the transportation of the products that were grown in Slocum to the markets that they necessarily had. So this picture probably dates to the turn of the century. Oop, too far. I'm going too far. Okay, this is the Slocum family homestead house right there, and this was on the corner just before that sharp turn out there in Slocum. And of course, even the roads out in Slocum are designed. If you drive out there, you know the roads are they run around all of the good farmland. So you can see again, this is a turn of the century photograph. The Slocum homestead house. Right next to it is a general store and post office. The school building for Slocum would have been just a little bit outside of the frame of this picture. And of course the Grange Hall, which is still there today, which is one of the last surviving relics of Slocum as a community, is down the road past where the rail station was. Now, the purists in the world would argue that this particular building is on the border of Slocum and Swamptown, and as a Swamptown guy, you know, I have to at least mention the word of Swamptown. But this is kind of interesting. This existed on the location that now Licio Field is, the place where our high school plays their baseball games. That's how the town got the land, because the land was originally there as the third of North Kingstown's poor farms. This one was called the Donut Hollow Poor Farm. I have no idea why that location is called Donut Hollow. I've tried to figure it out, but it's a fun name to say, and hopefully no donut shop will ever open out there and ruin it. But this is the town poor farm, and we had 3 of them in the community. This was the very last one. And you know, the idea of a poor farm, people think about it and they may think badly about it, but really what the poor farms were, and we had, the first one was in Wickford proper. The second one is in South Quidnesset on land that is now taken over by Quonset Development Corporation. And this was the third one. The whole idea of them was for a community to take care of their own. You know, if something happens to somebody in the community, if they can't take care of themselves, whether that has to do with actually poverty or has to do with health issues, or they just got old and there's nobody left to take care of them. Remember, we're talking in a time long before Social Security benefits and nursing homes and such. The community would take care of them. They were called farms because if you went there and you were able to work, there was a farm associated with all of these where you would farm the land and try to raise some of the food that you would eat in the farm there. But this was the largest and the last one out there, closed down around the time of World War II, and there was a North Kingstown paid staff member that took care of the folks at the poor farm, and in this place, in this sense, all across New England, communities were taking care of their own and not shipping them off to someplace else. After the poor farm system closed down, the state opened up a lot of their facilities up in Cranston, and folks were taken up there. But at this time, in North Kingstown and elsewhere, all communities had one. This was how people took care of the folks who needed help in their communities. This is the Kettle Hole Grist Mill. Typically, all agricultural communities would have a grist mill back in the day. This building still stands out on the Kettle Hole Pond. It's the pond itself, and the grist mill is all private property now, and you can't really see it from the road. But that was the grist mill that operated there, so the farmers in the area, farmers that were in Shermantown, Slocum, or Swamptown could go out there and get their corn or their wheat ground into either cornmeal or flour. that man in the front is thought to be Charles Henry Rose, who was the known as the Swamp Town poet, who was out there amusing himself all the time, making up stories and songs and amusing everybody who came along. These folks who ran these grist mills didn't get paid cash. They got what was called a keep, which is they get to keep a certain percentage, an agreed upon percentage of whatever they ground for you. If you came in with 100 bushels of corn and you wanted cornmeal, he would take maybe a bushel of it, and he'd keep that, and he could use it for himself, to feed himself or his family, or he could sell it off, and that's how he made his money out there. But as I said, this grist mill building is still there, and the Kettle Hole Pond, which is a beautiful scenic location, still exists to this day out in the area just around where the ball field is. Another important member of the community out in the Slocum area, this is heading towards going down Slocum Road, heading almost down to where we are getting into the area towards Kingston, was Weaver Rose and his sister Elsie Rose. They were remarkable people who did hand weaving in basically the 18th century fashion, and they operated right up until the 1930s or 1940s. This is Elsie. She's sitting out in front of their rundown house, but inside of this house were the looms that they utilized to weave beautiful various items, coverlets for beds, window curtains, etc. And I believe that the Slocum Grange actually has a wonderful Weaver Rose piece. Is that one of the things that's on display? No. Oh, it's too bad, because it's gorgeous, and it's something that was pretty well known. Folks nearby in Saunderstown began to realize the incredible detailed craftsmanship of Weaver Rose, who was Henry Harrison Rose, named after the president that was alive, was the president when he was born, and Elsie would make in their shops. So folks like Owen Wister and even Teddy Roosevelt would show up at the Roses' house to purchase things from them, and indeed some of Weaver Rose's and Elsie Rose's pieces are in the permanent Smithsonian collection at this time. That they were extraordinary craftsmen out there living a life the way that their parents and grandparents did. There's an interesting story, which I'll close this section with, about both of the Roses. Weaver Rose was deathly afraid of being buried underground, and he made his sister promise him that he would not be buried underground, which was confusing for somebody who lives out in a farm. What do you do with that? So what they did is they actually had a large pigsty that they had on the property there, which had walls that were 5 feet high that they had kept the pigs in. And when Weaver Rose passed away, Elsie, mulled it over and said, "How can I actually respect the request of my brother that he didn't want to be buried underground?" So what they did is they took the pigs to a new location, fortified the walls of the pigsty, and laid them in the bottom of it and filled it in with soil. So it's one of the most unusual graveyards, historic cemeteries in all of Rhode Island, and it's out there at the edge of Slocum. This big this big stone-walled block of soil with Weaver Rose in it. Elsie, at the end of her days, decided she wanted to be buried along with her brother, and she's buried there as well. So, Slocum is a wonderful place. I'll close by just going back to that farmer story. I would like to be able to go back in time and tell the farmers of the 17 and 1800s what they raise out there in Slocum now. They would be amazed. Imagine telling a farmer who has spent his days out in Slocum growing corn or raising dairy cattle or potatoes, and telling them that those hundreds of acres now in Slocum are being utilized to grow grass. I think they'd think we were all crazy, and sometimes I think we probably are. But this area is extraordinary farmland, and we hope in North Kingstown that it'll stay farmland for as long as we can. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jim Garman, and I have to correct Matt. I'm actually the Jim Garman of North Kingstown. He's not the Tim Cranston of Portsmouth. So, thank you with that, and I'll turn it over to Jim now.
Thank you, Tim. Let me get organized too. I don't know if you want to shut that off, 'cause I don't have any pictures.
What do you like? You want me to hold your bottle? Or?
No, I'll send leave it up. Leave it up. Okay, doesn't matter. Good evening, everyone. I'm a little bit hoarse tonight because I had a lecture 3 nights ago on the bridges to Aquidneck Island, and I went on for about an hour and a quarter. I won't do that tonight. But anyway, I'll tell you a little bit about my involvement with Slocum. Slocum Corners, Slocumville, Slocums with an S, and finally Slocum. I live in Portsmouth and in a particular housing development that's called Slocum Farm. And running through the middle of it is Slocum Road. Interestingly, because originally a man by the name of Giles Slocum came to Portsmouth in 1639, a year after Portsmouth was settled. We Portsmouth people, and I've been one for about 50 some years, brag about the fact that Portsmouth was founded in 1638, largely through the efforts of Anne Hutchinson and a number of other people. 1638. Newport wasn't founded until 1639, so we have a jump on Newport. They don't like to hear that. Anyway, some of the Slocum descendants over time moved further west. They went to Jamestown and had settlements in Jamestown. And eventually, largely through the efforts of Joseph E. Slocum, his dates were 1767 to 1858, he was a prominent member of the Slocum family and came to Slocum Corners in those days and lived in a mansion that unfortunately no longer stands. He was an active coastal trader. He was involved in trade on the high seas. And a lot of the time when he was not trading, he was living in Charleston, South Carolina, which was a major trading port back then too. I first visited the village of Slocum, and without really knowing where I was going, frankly, about 2008. I met Donna, who's going to be the next speaker, and she told me there was a very little Slocum history that had been written. And since I was involved in writing history, I've written 6 books on Newport County history mostly, everything from Westport to Jamestown and everything in between. And I have a tremendous photography collection. A lot of it's postcards from the early 20th century, and it amounts to somewhere in the vicinity of about 6,000 postcards. And it's a great collection of stuff that I'm trying to figure out what to do with now. But it's something that's very special to me, and I look at them for breakfast every morning. I love them. Anyway, she told me that she had this neighbor over here who was 98 years old. I don't think I ever met anybody that was 90 years old. I'm getting close, though. But anyway, he was 98 years old, and he had lived in the same house for his entire life. And that kind of triggered something, and I said, oh, come on, let's go. We have to go talk to this guy. Donna was a little reluctant. She lived next to the guy, almost next to the guy, for about 30 years, and she was always afraid to ask him anything. Well, we solved that problem, as she'll tell you in the next part. So this led to several conversations with Mr. Noss and a trip or two around Slocum, including a trip to Split Rock, which was kind of an interesting trip, especially as he reminisced about having been there sometime in the 1920s. But it was really interesting to talk to him. So we just started collecting things about Slocum. We found a great collection of photographs of postcards, actually, from a friend of ours, and I copied them. Donna has them too, and they're in that notebook on the table if you want to look at them afterwards. They really show Slocum primarily in the period of, roughly 1900 to 1920 or so, which was a big postcard era. Well, postcards went out of business pretty much at World War I because there was a paper shortage, but it came back really strongly after that. As far as my postcard collection goes, I don't collect anything after about 1940. I lived between 1900 and 1940. Anyway, that's my life. Anyway, so we started talking to this man, and found out that he was a fascinating person to talk to. He was incredibly sharp. Donna's going to talk more about him, and you're going to see a short film of him later on. I won't go into that much, but we found out a lot of the fundamentals of Slocum history. He really was very, very sharp. And he continued to live on for a number of years after that. I'll let Donna tell you that story. Anyway, so what I want to talk about mainly are two things that are important to the Slocum Village, and that is the Grange and the railroad. Those are two of many topics we could talk about, but I just thought I would emphasize this. Local 36 of the Grange. What is the Grange? Some people don't know what the Grange is. It's also known as the National Grange of the Order of Patrons of Husbandry. The Granger movement in the United States began in 1867, right after the Civil War. And Slocum's history in Local 36 goes back to that time, just about. And so the Granger movement initially was an organization that was set up that emphasized education and social activities to educate prospective farmers and farmers. There were all kinds of seminars and things like that were held, and also social activities, dances and things like that. And so they also, however, eventually got involved in politics, got involved in things that were interesting to protect the farmers' rights and the farmers' capabilities. And there was a lot of room for finding fault. The Grange was a major hit, mainly because the United States was primarily an agricultural nation at that time. This was before industrialization. Industrialization really gets going in the 1880s and on. So the Grange in 1873 had 200,000 members. In 1875, it had 858,000 members. And they're all set up in individual granges in communities, and they eventually got involved in the idea of encouraging Congress to pass laws to protect the agricultural interests in the country. Whoops, sorry. Oh well, clear on. Anyway, so they did become political because they really had to rally to get the politicians to do something for the farmers. I think this may astonish you, but the Grange advocated various political transitions, and this is what some of them were. The graduated income tax, the 8-hour workday, not that any farmer ever worked an 8-hour workday. My son's a farmer, by the way. Direct election of senators. Senators were elected by the state legislatures back then. And importantly, and this is the big one, government control of railroads, telephones, and telegraph. Guess what? They got all of those. All of those were eventually passed. They weren't passed by the Granger movement. They were passed by the fact that the Grangers established a political party called the People's Party, or the Populist Party. And they were active from 1891 to 1908. But eventually they were absorbed into the Democratic Party. And through the Democratic Party, at the turn of a little bit beyond the turn of the century, a lot of these things were passed. So the Slocum Grange was interested in all of these issues for their members, and it still functions, and it still exists, and it serves some of the same purposes. Another important local institution, as far as Slocum was concerned, was the railroad station. The railroad station was a very important part of the local community, especially because it was used to get farm produce to market. And again, the location is significant because it's not far to Providence, and it's not far to some of the big cities in Connecticut and even beyond to New York. So the Providence and Boston Railroad was established in 1833 in this area. And the line from Providence to Stonington was set up in 1837. And so the railroads were very important functioning during that 19th century. Near the end of the century, in 1892, the local railroads became part of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad, which continued to operate until 1968. Okay, and very much an important part of the local community. Now we have the Acela that goes through town somewhere between 100 and 150 miles an hour. That's about the only railroad we don't really see it, we hear it. Just, I've been out there a couple of times, and all of a sudden Donna said, "Here it comes." I said, "What?" There it goes, it's gone. Anyway, so Donna and I learned a lot of Slocum history in this whole area from Mr. Noss. Again, he was he ended up being over 100 years old, and he lived in the same house. And the one-room schoolhouse was in his backyard. And he was just an ingenious person and a wonderful person to talk to. You'll see a video of him soon. So Slocum's history has been hidden for a lot of years. And with the help of Donna and Mr. and Mrs. Noss, she lived to 98, by the way. They were quite a couple. Anyway, I've been learning a lot more about the area in Slocum, like Indian Corner Road, Split Rock, Donut Hollow Farm, which we just saw, Elm Grove Cemetery, and especially the Slocum Grange number 36. I'm a real outsider over here because my whole orientation has been Newport County, and yet this is the kind of thing historians love. They love to find a new topic, something that hasn't been done a lot. And I've thoroughly, for the last 15 years, 14 years, we've been, we phone each other back and forth. I just got a picture of such and such, and things like that. So we keep in touch about it, and someday there'll be a book. We'll get that done. I have to encourage Donna to sit down and write it. I will be the advisor, okay? Anyway, it's been really a lot of fun as a historian to dig into Slocum, and in addition to my life's work, which is Newport County. Again, 50 years of that, I've been working on that. So there's a lot of local history to be discovered, not only in Slocum, but in all these small towns that we've been talking about before. Village life is wonderful, and it's really an interesting aspect of local history. And you know what? It hasn't been written much. It hasn't been talked about much. And yet, you sit down and read about some of these characters that worked on these farms and so on. It's just fascinating stories. We have lots and lots of stories that we could add, but not much time. Anyway, there's lots of local history to be discovered. I really appreciate you all coming, and I'm going to pass this over to Donna, who's going to talk some more. Thank you. What's the cord? What's the cord?
Okay. All right. I am not seasoned like these gentlemen. I am only here because Jim told me I had to do it. So keep that in mind, all right? I'm not a native Slocumite. I moved to Galilee from East Longmeadow, Mass. At the age of 20. In 1986, my husband wanted to buy a 2-family home, so that's how I ended up on Indian Corner Road. Because it was to be a temporary situation, I didn't check out the area. I didn't even know there was a train. It ended up that the husband was temporary and Slocum would become permanent. So for 26 years, Mr. Noss and I would pass each other on the way to the post office with nothing more than a nod. We finally started to speak while I was planting the garden at the post office. It was then that he asked me, why is it that people seem to know him? I explained that he had been in the same spot for close to 100 years, and that he was like a venerable old tree that people were fond of. I'd like to thank Tom Frawley of the North Kingstown Library for his assistance in getting me to this point tonight. And a special thank you to Jim Garman, who has told me for 14 years, you gotta do this. And this film would never have happened without Steve Timon, the videographer and editor. He volunteered to film Mr. Noss and I, and we were not the most willing subjects. And finally, a heartfelt thank you to Mr. Noss, who overcame his reclusiveness to answer the list of questions I had left in his tool bag one afternoon while he was working in his yard. Our friendship and collaboration began with a lengthy email I received about 1 month later. He spent his platinum years preserving the history of his beloved village of Slocum. So Mr. Noss, his background is he was born, lived, and died in the same house on Indian Corner Road in Slocum. Born pre-World War I, he grew up during the steam train era. He attended the one-room schoolhouse next door, where he brought a bucket of water from his well every morning. I once asked him, how do you go from drinking water from a dipper in the one-room schoolhouse to sending emails from the same spot? Just take it as it comes, Donna, just take it as it comes. He died at home less than 2 weeks after his 106th birthday, while experiencing his second global pandemic. If there's a word for Mr. Noss, it is sustainability. He was masterful at keeping current and finding ways to stay independent. He would modify yard equipment so he could continue taking care of his yard. He had better computer skills than me. His wife, Rosie, still cooked on the same chrome stove that he kept working by making his own components because parts were no longer available. He told me not to worry if he slumps over while mowing the lawn. The tractor had a kill switch. And yes, I once saw him mowing at 104. As you'll hear, he has an amazing memory. I would bring him a photograph and he could remember small details of the time. The grass is choppy, so pre-mowers, animals kept it short. He remembered the names and professions of the men waiting outside the station to take the steam train to Providence. Anyone I brought into the Noss home had to be vetted. At 102, he called to ask if I could drive him and Rosie to their tax preparation appointment at the senior center the next day because an ice storm was expected and his ride had canceled. I wanted to bring a man I was seeing to help because it was the two of them. As a URI grad, I asked Mr. Noss if he had followed football in the early 70s. No, he didn't follow his college's football team, but I had hoped he might remember my friend from his quarterback days. Oh, he was the quarterback? The guy knows how to take a hit. Then he tapped the side of his head and asked if he took too many. He and Rosie were a help and an inspiration to me as I struggled with multiple health issues during the years we knew each other. Every time I had to pause our work because I was facing another surgery or more treatment at MGH, he would tilt his head and give me a certain look and say, "May you be sustained during this time." Yes, Mr. Noss, I was sustained, and you, Rosie, and this project had a hand in that. So following is a story about our very last history meeting on New Year's Eve, which was with Paul, my friend here, Paul Haggis. So it's my custom to spend the afternoon of New Year's Eve with Mr. Noss. Until just 4 years ago, he would swing open the door while reciting a few lines from a poem about the New Year swiftly approaching. This year I knock on the door and he doesn't answer it, so I open the door and call in. He had fallen asleep while waiting for us. Paul, a neighbor and a railroad history enthusiast, is carrying a box full of some of the treasures from his collection. They include antique railroad lanterns, books, boxcar tags, and 4 old locks. Mr. Noss had worked at the long-gone Slocum train station as a young man before going to Europe to deploy early radar systems during World War II. He was born prior to World War I and has lived in this house his entire life. His father was a ticket agent at the Slocum station where Mr. Noss happily spent his youth. Paul hands Mr. Noss one of the lanterns. Macular degeneration is robbing him of his sight, but he uses his hands to see what the holes in his vision cannot. He tells us that once he had to stop an express steam train from the tower. The dispatcher instructed him to do so, and he grabbed 2 lanterns, one white and one red, and swung them over the tracks. Upon stopping, the conductor bolted up the tower stairs to ask why his train had been stopped, and was told because the freight train that had recently passed through the Slocum station had not made it into the Kingston station yet. Paul narrates the train photo books for over an hour. They discuss every station of the New Haven Railroad. Mr. Noss colors the narration with memories and details. This delights Paul, and he gladly angles the book to help Mr. Noss better see the pictures. Paul is grateful for this time with Mr. Noss. He appreciates the rare opportunity to talk with someone who lived the steam train era. I watched the 2 men chat and note that Mr. Noss's flannel shirt drapes over bone. He has lost his appetite except for sugar. Whenever I visit, I bring something I have baked and wrapped in foil. He always requested that I put it in the freezer. His grandson, who lives with him, won't eat it cold, but Mr. Noss doesn't mind. Today his grandson has gone to New Hampshire for an overnight trip, so this time Mr. Noss asks I put it in the refrigerator. I tell him it is more of the cake I shared with him last month, flavored with tea leaves and topped with honey buttercream frosting. His eyes shine and he thanks me with a conspiratorial grin. I believe he has just selected his 103rd New Year's Eve dinner. Mr. Noss also lights up at the sight of the railroad locks. He notes that some have keys in them. They are not the original keys, but Paul explains that sometimes keys can be made for old locks. Mr. Noss tells us that one of the locks is somewhat similar to a lock in his garage. So he puts on his coat, and we help get him and his walker down the side steps. He slowly makes his way to his garage, and we slide open the large doors and enter. The garage is a former one-room schoolhouse. A desk sits in the corner, but there hasn't been a student seated at it in about 100 years. The name Annie Prentice is etched in beautiful script on the eastern window. She was a teacher determined to leave her mark in Slocum. Most of the horsehair plaster has fallen from the ceiling's wooden slats. Suspended from the ceiling is a red kayak made from a kit. It's been 80 years since it floated on nearby Yagu Pond. Back then, the stream from the pond could be any color of the rainbow. The color changed every time the mill dyed fabric. Orange was the most notable, but indigo blue the most common because of the denim process there. We look at some shelving supported by ornate cast iron brackets. Hooked through a bracket is a very old railroad lock with a chain dangling from it. As a child, his younger brother had picked it up and locked it on the shelf bracket. It's been locked for 90-odd years. Without a key, it has hung there all these years. Mr. Noss, aged 104 years and 6 months, is asking if it can be unlocked. Paul does not have a key with him that will suit this lock, but he has a collection of old keys at home. He examines the lock and determines it is far older than anything he has seen before. He believes the mechanism is probably too corroded to release and is doubtful that any keys from his collection will work. He offers to return next week with WD-40 in his key collection. Mr. Noss requests that we wait until spring because it could be too cold for him to come out again this winter. It's now late afternoon on New Year's Eve 2018, and back in the house I wish him a Happy New Year. He is surprised and delighted it is tonight. He is just hours away from seeing 2019. Well, that snuck up on me, he chuckles. So now it's time to meet Mr. Noss.
My name is Alvin J. Noss, Jr., and I was born in 1914 in Slocum. My father was an agent at Slocum, and his name was Alvin J. Noss, and my folks called me Junior and Joe and Joseph.
And you've been here 101 years next month?
I didn't quite get that.
And you will have lived here 101 years next month.
Oh yes, I will be
June?
101 years next month here in Slocum.
Always in Slocum, in the same house.
That's right, in the same house. About this picture of the Slocum station, those people sitting out in front are waiting for the morning train to go to the city. And this is where my father worked, and here there's two doors in front. The one on the right is the waiting room for the men. The one on the left is a ladies' waiting room. And the inside on the left, on the right rather, was a inside there was weigh scales, a pair of scales, and of course a ticket window. And there was something else I think of just now, is that when my father made entries in a ledger, he did it with an indelible pencil, and after that was done, he would have a damp something laid over and pressed down, and indelible writing would turn to ink, and it made it a permanent record.
How many cars on the train, Mr. Noss?
Well, it'd be, the train would come in, would have 2 passenger cars. One would be a smoker, and the other would be a regular car with no smoking. And in front of that would be a railway mail car and a baggage car, and the first car behind the engine would be what we call a milk car. As when the train stopped there was another platform on the other side, the crossing, with a big high-wheel cart, and it had 20-gallon can of milk on it. It was brought down from a farm up in Exeter along Liberty Road, and that was drawn over to close to the rail car, and was put aboard the rail car and taken into the city for processing.
And what was the name of the train line?
That would be on the New Haven Railroad, at that time called the New York, New Hartford and Railroad Company.
And your father was the agent for how long?
My father worked here from 1912 to 1928. And that was the beginning of the Depression. And of course he had a chance to go to another station in Massachusetts, where because of his seniority, he was able to bump someone out of a job, and that was kind of bad. There's the view, the rear of this station shows the crossing, and yeah. Well, this is still a rule of the front. Shows the.
You want this one?
Yeah, that's okay. This is we got the tower there, which would be the control tower for the trains. They call that a block tower because this is set up in blocks from station to station, and the towerman had control of the trains through his area. He got his directions from the dispatcher in Providence over a telephone that he had, a railway telephone, not like an original common telephone we use in our houses. And he had those, in the tower, he had big control levers. He had control of the switches and control of the semaphore signals. And they were controlled by those big levers, by wires that were threaded through under the tracks and on little pulleys. And so sometimes it was pretty hard to pull that over. The switches would be harder to pull than the signals, because they were just harder to pull, and they had to pull on those levers, pretty levers, put the foot up on the towerman, put his foot up on one lever and pull on the other lever, and pull it right over. So
How many trains a day?
there were at least 2 trains a day that and toward the end of it. Before that, there was actually, I believe there was a train in the morning and a train at night, and there were trains at noon for a while.
Tell me about the white flag trains. The
Let's
special
see,
trains, the white flag trains?
Oh, there's some trains came through had was specials. There weren't regular scheduled trains. There were specials and run for a certain purpose or run for passenger run for no, I can't think what it is.
It looked like
Excursions, like they would have the white flag showing that to be a sort of an extra train. Let's see.
And how many people would be down at the station on a given day?
And there'd be only people that are taking a train to the city or coming from the city, and there hardly be anybody else down there that I could ever remember.
But your father was busy. But your father was a busy man with the freight.
Yes, he was busy man with the. My father had the freight there, and not kept him entirely busy though, because while he had to go out to the freight house and check the freight that had come in, perhaps in the afternoon from a local freight, things like that. It wasn't terribly busy from that standpoint. They had time off in the afternoon, was so slack, and the tarman had time off too, because at times there were trains were quite some distance away, like coming out of Boston or coming out of New Haven and so forth. So he had quite a bit of time before he had to do anything, like put the gates down or catch any emergency from the dispatcher, anything you might say. And so my father and the tarman would go out behind the tower where he had some stakes set up, and they'd pitch horseshoes for about whatever time they had, maybe 20 minutes or so. Not too long. I have to go back to work, because something might come, trains might come. Well, they have a schedule for that, but he has to be ahead of time. So there's a view looking behind the buildings.
Where was the horseshoe pit?
Pardon?
Where was the horseshoe pit?
Oh, behind this building here.
Behind this building?
Yeah.
Okay.
Behind that building.
All right. Now here's the station.
This is the other. This is the view of the buildings from the roadside. There's the back view of the tower and the station, and other buildings down to the left of the station, down the track, would be a baggage, probably for Railway Express, to keep it safe until it's picked up. And there's a coal shed for supply of coal to keep them warm. And,
Tell me the soft coal story.
the freights used to go through there, bringing carloads of coal. The coal was something used quite a bit in those days, and so those trains would climb up Wickford Hill and go down the other side. That's by the Dry Bridge Road, and it would get to bouncing a little bit. It can't help it sometimes. The freights travel along, the cars kind of bounce, and the coal would be heaped up on the cars, and it would roll off from time to time and along those stretches where the tracks are rough and the trains go fast. And those coal could be picked up, which I did at times. My brother and I picked up some coal. We used it to heat the post office that my mother had. So that was a help.
Can you list all the buildings in that picture? What they were, each one? What each building was? There was the baggage one.
No, I didn't get that.
Pardon?
I didn't get
What each building is?
what they are.
Yeah, what they are. And the one that still stands today?
Oh, the one, I mean, yes, the building across the track was a grocery store at the time. And that would make 2 stores in Slocum. The one behind us in this view, and of course this is the signal tower and the station. And I guess I mentioned these before. There was another building, I think was a Railway Express building for storage there, and a coal shed. And this is the corner of Indian Corner Road, and Slocum Road goes off to the left, or straight off to the left.
And how was it, did you ever work the handcart? Did you ever work the handcart kept in the building?
There was a hand cart used to bring the mail from the store, from the trains over to the post office, but I didn't see much of that. There was, maybe are you referring to the question about whether they named Slocums? I often wondered where that name Slocums, or the S come from, to make it Slocum Station, because the name board on the station was Slocums, not Slocum. And the thought I had, and I don't know if anywhere near right or not, is that during the early days, there was perhaps a person that lived in Slocum, and he was someplace near the tracks, and he probably met the trains way back in the early days. The early time I think of, and I have no idea that it's right or not, it would be like as early as the Providence and Stonington Railroad, as before the New Haven, where this person, let's call him Mr. Slocum, I don't know if that's right or not, and he met the trains, and so his place would be called Slocum's. The conductor would call off the names Slocum's for the train, the station stop. And they still did, for as long as trains stopped there, the conductor would, approaching Slocum Station, would call out Slocum's. And
that building burnt.
And that building burnt, and it was thought that was caused by sparks from a railroad engine, from a train going through, the steam trains then, and that could be sparks. They thought it was that burned it down.
How old were you when you got your first car? Your father got the first car?
I probably was maybe 13, 14. I mean, not up to driving age. So
What did you do before you had a car?
we traveled, before we had a car, we would go anywhere. Like we traveled by train. We'd go into the city, travel by train. But we didn't go like short distances to the beach or anything like that until we had a car. We really didn't need to, because from that standpoint, because we had grocery stores and other store for dry goods and everything in town, in Slocum.
And what did the bread man do when there were snow drifts?
And he got the bread. You got bread there every day in the Mr. Wilson's grocery store, and there's during the winter time there'd be some big storms and there's snow drifts, and it's difficult. The road would be really blocked, and you couldn't get through there. But the bread man, we always to say, the bread man always got through. And they got through because he was able to, because of the wind and the snow, blew drifts across the field and bare spots. So he was able to find all the bare spots where he turned onto Indian Corner Road at the beginning part, and find his way across all the fields on there, because there's bare spots and other spots were not quite so bare, would still be able to maneuver them and get through. So we used to say the bread man always got through.
More than the mailman?
What's that?
More than the mailman? You know how they say the mail always gets delivered, but for you it was the bread always
that
gets
mail,
delivered?
the mail always, the mail always came off the train. We never got the mail anywhere else but off the train, and so from the Railway Express. And there was at that time too, you could say you lived in say Westerly or Shannock, and you wanted to write a letter to somebody in Slocum. It would be delivered. You could write it, and before the ink was dry, you could almost mail it and get it posted on the train. Meet the train, have somebody put down for it, hand it to the railway clerk, mail clerk, and it would he'd sort them out on the train. Mail will be sorted out and bagged for different station stops, and the one for Slocum be thrown off at Slocum. I say thrown off, but set off. I mean, the train stopped and you picked it. It was set off. So and delivered to the post office, and it could be delivered, and you could read there. You could see your mail the same day or a few hours, actually. I've known that to happen once.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience when you were bagging the potatoes.
About potatoes.
The potato. Tell me about the potato fields.
Potato shed, potatoes were bagged and brought in to the potato shed, put on scales, and it would bag. The bags were on the scales so that we'd have the right weight, and they'd twist up the two sides of the top of the potatoes, make like ears, and we'd have like a needle and a bit of heavy, almost like little, like twine or stronger than that, and wind it around the ears and put the pin through to kind of make it stay, and have the two ears. You could pick up the bag with those two ears, on the two ears of the bag itself that were wound that way, and put them on hand trucks and wheel it into a waiting truck that was up right by the end of the platform of the farm where the bags was, where the potatoes were sorted out, and loaded right into the truck. I used to help with that and run the hand trucks into the truck and put the bags in the deeper part of the truck, and then go get some more bags to help load the truck up, so forth. And there's to be where the truck matched the platform was a little bump there, and I used to like to go push that truck over the bump, and it'd make a nice little, bounce there. And the boss came over and he told me, he said, "Don't do that till you get them bruised that way." So I stopped. But I don't know what happened to potatoes. They just went into the city, and what was done with them next. Whether they just went into the general market, I don't know.
Now, your mother was the postmistress?
Yes.
What years was that?
Well, I don't have that figure at hand. I think it's on a...
She was the postmistress in that building? In the
Yeah,
was that
yeah.
the 30s she was a postmistress?
In the, I would say in the 30s, yes, in the 30s. In the 30s. But I don't know the dates, because there's a postmaster list that gives the dates on all the things. And she was also a postmaster in the general store down the corner. But she moved up here because Mr. Wilson wanted the space that was used for the post office down there for adding a section for dry goods and so forth, and overalls and shoes and stuff.
Now, there was somebody who lived in this house, right?
And on the other side of the house, there's a section there that was a retired railroad man lived there.
So, Mr. Noss, what is it like to go from a one-room schoolhouse to using a computer at nearly 101?
It was, I would almost say it was nearly seamless.
God cracks me up.
Seamless. It just took it.
Is that the secret, Mr. Noss? Is that the secret? You just take it?
You just take it as seamless. But there was difficulties along the way, but they were taken care of because I had help. Of course, my first computer was given to me by my daughter's friend, and of course my daughter had had a computer of her own, and she had taken classes on computer technology and so forth. So she was able to help me through all the difficulties and get started and so forth. And then from there, as I did things myself, I tend to remember them a little, so I'd get stuck again. And there were times when I did get stuck, and I'd just get on the phone and call my daughter up, and she'd put me square, and I'd get to a point there.
Do you remember why we started doing this?
Talking about history.
Why we started doing what we're doing right now?
Oh,
I do.
what did we do?
Jim found this postcard.
Oh, the Split Rock. Split Rock, yeah, that's what started it all.
So Jim found this postcard, which says Split Rock, Slocum's, Rhode Island. He emails me and said, "What is this?" And he goes, "Should we ask Mr. N?" So I emailed you a copy of it. Then you started emailing me back various ideas you had.
You had it posted in the post office too for
Yeah, oh yeah, we were trying to find Split Rock. We were asking people, we had to post it. Ernie and I went driving around to Split Rock Trailer Park.
Where was it, Exeter?
Nobody knew.
It's an, nobody
Yeah.
knows, yeah. It is, it's in Exeter, just over the line.
Maybe.
But nobody was responding. Ernie and I went driving around to different places. Nobody knows about Split Rock. There are other Split Rocks, but nobody knows this Split Rock. So then,
Not easy to find.
so then you end up starting working on the project, and you remembered that somebody told you about this in the 30s.
It has something to do with the railroad track too.
Yeah, someone from the railroad.
Well, there was the second. This is after the railroad station was closed. The railroad crossing still had to be kept open and cared for, watched for, and so the person that worked in the tower was no longer a towerman, but he was a crossing watchman, a different person. He put the gates up and down when the trains came, see. So me and another fellow was up there, and on the evening shift, or the second shift, the watchman is a friendly person, so we go up and we talk with him, and so he had been one that had traveled, hunted all through that area, through Liberty Road and all through there. He lived in, he lived down down toward near the curve of the track, where the curve goes toward Kingston again. What's that road? Wolf Rock Road.
Oh, okay.
Wolf Rock Road. He lived down toward Wolf Rock Road. And so he told me about that. So I think I went in there and I found it, about just where he said it was, and I walked through it. Long before you found it again.
Yes. And then, well, can you tell me about this picture, Mr. Noss?
This
picture.
That picture, oh yes. That's a photo of my three children. They're standing under the signboard of the Slocum station. It was set up, and they're standing in the very spot where the stations used to stand, where their grandfather worked. That's quite a picture. That the station's gone, but the signboard overhead says Slocum's, and they were right there where their grandfather used to work. And that's long gone now. Even that's not around.
But you're still here.
Pardon?
But you're still here.
Yeah. So far, yes. So.
Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody has any questions for anybody. We'll try to answer those if we can.
Were the postcards the one that Mr. Garman collected? How did you Split Rock?
Yes, I came from June.
So that's what, the postcards that we saw are from your postcard collection?
We ran into a member of the Providence Postcard Club who collects small towns, and he came over one day and to Donna's house, and we went through it, and he loaned us, 30?
Yeah, he wanted 3, but it was you who found the Split Rock one. I thought you gave him
Yeah, Split Rock, we took, I had some other ones of those, we took that day too. But the ones, mine, I blew up in 8x10s, they're in the album here. You can take a look at those. But we searched for about how many months before we found one picture of Slocum. It was really hard to find them. But then all of a sudden, this one guy came through with about 30 of them. And I copied them, and Donna has them too. So we were very fortunate to get those.
some
Was
of
he
those
holding the
photos-
original ones? The ones that he, were they copied, the ones that Mr. Noss was holding, and we could view it?
Oh, those are, a lot of those are Mr. Noss's pictures.
Oh.
He took those as a kid with his Garman camera. So he took, like, you see a picture of the coincides from the 30s, that's a bicycle.
What's going to happen to all his pictures?
I have,
Oh, good.
I have, and they're all gonna go to the library, that's part of what this is all about, his collection. Will go to the library, but the steam train, he's taking pictures off the Drawbridge Road, the steam train, so maybe it was, the one in front of the station with the 3 men sitting there, that was fun to know.
He asked us if we wanted him to walk through Split Rock. About 99. Why the guy?
Is Split Rock on public property or?
No, it's private, and I cannot reveal where it is.
I can't bring my grandchildren.
Treasure, we got special
We
permission.
got permission, yes, we got permission.
Especially because we were taking him with us. But he knew where it was from 1922 or something. Any other questions? Yes?
I just wondered how did Mr. Noss earn his living while he was...
He was an electrical engineer for, I think, water systems, or municipal water systems, is that correct? Yeah, so he did, that's why he was able to do his own stove components, he was very, very good.
The stove was quiet and empty.
Yeah, he was proud, he used to trim these, he had large hedges on his property, so he turned his hedge, he made some sort of battery pack for it, so he could still do the hedge. He was an amazing fellow. A nice young couple died.
Still there.
Yep, they had to upgrade it, but it still has the essence of the Nosses. They're doing a very nice job of it.
We did
Is
a
it on
tour.
the historic register?
No, it was part of the bus tour.
We did a bus tour of Slocum with the Historic Preservation Commission. And we rode around, and he wasn't feeling well that day, but he was on his porch and he waved to everybody. We told stories about him on the bus too. Anyway, any other questions to have? Thank you all for coming, really appreciate it.
One question. You said this 30 minutes was part of a larger,
Yes, it's an hour and a half piece.
it's in our DVD library?
I did the editing for this. I'm going to go behind you too. I did the video and the editing for this, and this is just a small part. The video we did was part of a North Kingstown. He did a special, and then we went. He did over almost 2 hours of talking about it. So it's another hour and a half that I'm still finishing up. Will probably be part of the library department.
So they're like DVDs that you borrow from the library? Or you
I have to
just
talk to Tom Frawley about
Yeah, we'll have to
it.
figure out later.
The images and the video is all going to become part of the Noss collection in the library. So it's moving that way.
Right, so before everyone runs off, I just want to let you know that the next of the speaker series will be here Thursday, April 18th at 6:30. The topic is North Kingstown and the Revolutionary War. The historian Christian McBurney will be speaking about American Revolutionary War heroes from near Wickford, focusing on Major Samuel Phillips, Captain George Babcock, Captain Thomas Cole, and Private Jack Phone. And Mr. McBurney is an author. He's written numerous books about Rhode Island history. And so I would encourage you to come to that lecture. It's sponsored by the Battle of Rhode Island Foundation and also the, I believe, the library as well. So,
She had him in Portsmouth about 2 weeks ago, so really, he has some great resources. And you should see his books. He's read about 6 books in the last 7 years. And they're all really outstanding, all from Rhode Island. He lives over this way, but he works in Washington.
great. Thank you for coming.